There we go.
Okay, so I hit record, so I'm hoping that we record this time. Um, so what I'm going to do is the reason that it didn't record, according to GoToWebinar, was that I launched a poll prior to hitting record, and I'm a little worried because I did just hit record before you launched your screen sharing, but it should work. Anyway, so I'm going to launch this quick poll, and we're just kind of asking you how many people have actually used or actually use briefs for your creative process, and that can be either within Function Point or external to Function Point. So I'm going to leave that up for a minute or so, and then Chris will start going through the information. And the other thing that I did want to mention before we get going is if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please send them through the questions area within GoToWebinar, and I will be answering them throughout. And then Chris will also go through answering them, answering any of the questions that deal with his content as he goes through that. So please do feel free to do that. We do have to keep people on mute because of the amount of people that we have attending. And if we unmute people, we tend to get things breaking up and very noisy and echoey.
Thank you for voting, everyone. I see the votes to the poll coming in. It's interesting to see this coming in real time. We'll just leave that up for
Okay.
another 30 seconds.
All right, so I'm gonna actually close this poll off. It looks like most of you have voted, so thank you very much. And Chris, I'm gonna pass it on to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Tate. As I mentioned earlier, this is a revisit to the Working with Briefs in Function Point webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago, and we're redoing it so that we can get a recording of it. We've been having challenges with GoToWebinar and getting our recordings done, and this is some great information. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really pleased to have you joining us. We've got people from across North America with us today, and I certainly believe that your participation in these events will make you a more robust user of our tools. Today we're going to provide you with a review of the brief module in Function Point. I'm going to basically take us through a review of the main pages associated with the brief section, and I'm going to show you principally two approaches to working with briefs. I'm going to point out how you can work with briefs potentially as an intake form for a new job. Many of our clients have account executives filling out a brief before someone builds out a workflow or an estimate for the job, a series of tasks or an estimate for the job, while others in our user base create a brief once the job has been opened and confirmed as a go for the client. I'd like to point out that it's also possible to have Function Point, to work with Function Point to do a brief from the client portal. And I just wanted to briefly show the, no pun intended, the client portal and the create a new request form. This form is not a focus of today's webinar, but please stay tuned. I will be doing a webinar in the future that really comes back to the FP portal and how you can use FP portal for getting requests to be put in by your clients. So that being said, I'm going to show two approaches to using briefs, as I mentioned. That is using them as an intake form and using them once you've opened a job. The last part of the webinar, I'll focus on showing how you as an administrator in your version of Function Point can configure these brief forms in the system. I'll go into the administrative section, review the pages used for this, and I'll talk towards some of the specific items. As usual, Tate's monitoring today's webinar, and we'll be answering questions as we go. And again, we are trying to record this, so I encourage you to visit our community help in order to view the recordings of this webinar and others. Be sure to check us out on LinkedIn. It's a growing resource where we are having more and more participation with users, and really, I do thank you for joining us today. My goal is to complete this session in the next 35 to 40 minutes, so let me just move this Word document aside as my intro and pull our version of Function Point into place for me to work with you. Here we go. Too many screens open. Enlarge this, make it a little bigger. Here we go. Excellent. The creative brief is like a roadmap of the work that's to be performed. When done well, it leads to imaginative outcomes for the work you're doing, and it gets you to that outcome quickly. As consultants to hundreds of agencies, we recommend creating a brief for each and every job that you do. But that's not the whole story. The brief you use should relate directly to the job work or the job type that you're performing. As such, Function Point allows you to create multiple brief types to drive your creative process. Just to note, I wanted to come back and really just discuss briefly the results to the poll as we start the presentation. It looks like 14% of you are using briefs 90% of the time or greater. 36% are working with briefs 50 to 90%, and approximately 50% are working less than 50% of the time on brief. So interesting, 36%, less than 20%. Although I am happy to say that that we don't have anyone who's saying they're never using briefs. So quite a cross-section of use of the briefs within your firms. So briefs are really a section within Function Point. Everyone is certainly well aware of the modules within our tool, companies, contacts, briefs, etc. The brief section follows the standard 3-page configuration of all of our Function Point modules. And I'm going to start by just walking through the routines associated with finding, reviewing the list view, and talking toward the detail page in the brief section. This same process or standard 3-page configuration, of course, is consistent across our whole product. I'm then going to take us through and just talk a little bit about this actual navigation tool itself, and then speak towards the 2 scenarios. So as I mentioned, it follows the 3 standard pages. You can come in and, of course, look to find specific briefs within Function Point without regard to the other silos. You could use the name or brief type. You see the specific fields from the Find screen here, including Account Executive. And one of the new items that we've put in is that you can also do a search under Find Active that relates to the job status of the associated briefs. So the briefs are obviously related to a job, and this Find Active will find all briefs that are related to current active jobs that you have on the go in your studio. The list view is presented. It is the second of the standard pages. And of course, the list views present sort options for you to pull these items together into groups that make sense for you. Notice here I have it currently sorted under companies. The system will remember that the sort order that you have put into place the next time you return to this list. So in my situation, it's sorted by company as well as by date, and hence it will always show this information or the found set in this fashion. Of course, there are outputs associated here. You can remove the sort order. You can print this to PDF or export it to CSV should you have the privileges. And coming into here and selecting one of these items, let me just choose a brochure brief, for instance, will drive us into the detail page for the specific brief that we're looking at. This 3-page, the Find, the List, and the Detail page are consistent, again, across all of the Function Point modules. On the Detail page here, you'll see our action icons as they are available here in the top section. Should you have permissions to delete, the icon is presented. to navigate to estimate details if there was not a related estimate, which you can see through the link here in the details section. This would say add an estimate, which would allow you to create that estimate. Similarly, the print details and the print page 2 items. As with all detail pages, you can scroll down to see more information that's been put in. We keep that summary at the top. And of course, also the ability to edit the header information that's relative to this particular brief. Good. When you have completed a brief, a process that I'll take you through in a moment in our 2 scenarios, you can also drill back into this detail page and use this particular edit icon in order to get in to change specific details. Here you can see that we've gotten a brief where there are some inputs that have been put in, all typically text or description fields. Now, coming back to the navigation itself. The brief component, of course, in itself, in the module menu, if I select this, this repeats the previous find that I had done. And this is, again, consistent across the whole tool. So anytime you've done a search, if it was, say, for open jobs or jobs for a specific company, or in this case, briefs that were related to open jobs, just selecting the navigation, the main menu navigation module name will repeat that find for you. There's the find brief that takes you to the find page. And then the other one that I always like to show is this process of presenting to you the last detail pages that you had been on. So under the view brief or view jobs or view estimates, whichever silo of function point you're in, it will present to you the last detail pages that you had previously been on. And this can be extremely valuable when you've navigated into a detail page and then perhaps used the breadcrumb or related information in that to get you through to a deeper page within that particular item. This allows you to come back to the menu and, by selecting, take you back to the detail page. Here you can see I was just on the Branson Airways icon. If I choose it, it takes us back to that page that I was showing to you a moment ago. Finally, under the main navigation, the add icon at the bottom. This is one of the fundamental ways for adding a new record to the silo or module that you're paying attention to. In this case, taking us to the add brief icon. I'm not going to use this to demonstrate my first scenario. That scenario being having an account executive to fill in a brief and build an estimate ultimately from it. That account executive could initiate or trigger the creation of that brief from this particular icon. But what I wanted to point out was to take you up to the company detail page and to just show to you from the company detail page the visibility to information such as briefs that is present here. So think of an account executive. They've been over at Kingsgate Driving School speaking with their associate there, and they are coming back to create a brief as a request to get an estimate created for the work being requested. So in this situation, that user can come in. They can just simply come up and select the Add Brief icon, but they can also get a quick overview of what's been done for this client in the past by choosing the appropriate tabs within the lower section. Of course, the grids are presented showing any of the work that had been previously done, and in this case, I'm just wanting to show to you the specific briefs that had been previously created for this particular client. So they can look at those items. Perhaps they drill in to get ideas of the brief presentations that have been used for those clients in the past. And then they go ahead and select the Add Brief icon in the top action area. Pretty straightforward. Drops us into the brief add page. They can put in the brief, so I could put in webinar presentation. Oh, excuse me. And my spelling skills, presentation. They can then, of course, select from the brief types. And this is where we exemplify really how in the administrative section of the tool, you can work to put in multiple brief types that are relative to the work that's being performed. And I'll just select standard as my example. I can choose key contacts from the particular company that I'm working with. In this case, I'll select Wayne. And of course, it's important to just point out with any of our smart fields, you can type a partial match and simply tab out of that field by, say, clicking somewhere else on the page, and it will search if there's a single match or to present that pop-up that we had just been looking for. In the case of the company name, it will auto-populate it because we had come from the company detail page where the information from that company was known, so it automatically got put in. And my name was put in on that company as the account executive, so it automatically populates it here as well. Now, our header record, or the header component of every brief, allows for someone to put in what was a budget being associated with the potential work that this customer is asked to be having done. We could put in what is the due date or when is it expected. And of course, we can also, if there were previous estimates made or that type of thing, fill in and relate it to that, or to put in how is this project typically going to be done. The top description is a box that is really the introduction to this particular introduction to the work, and it shows on estimates and invoices. So the description that is put into this particular brief field is really intended to be something that is client-facing, something that you're not in any way hesitant to have the client read from you. Because as you go to creating further documents from this foundation piece, this information will pass automatically and the user will not need to retype it. So I'm going to now just select Save and Next, and it's going to fundamentally take us into the first page of my standard brief. The initial field is showing itself in this orange background. That is telling us that this is a required field. The overall goals are filled in, i.e., really looking for the user to put in information that's relative to the question being asked. The real gist of our whole brief section is that what you see here, what is the big picture? A little prompter to, what is the overall goal of the project, and the type of response that is being prompted from the user is all showing in such a fashion that you can configure these for your own requirements. And this brief sort of demonstrates some of the different types of responses that you can automatically facilitate. We've got the large description box that you see here. It can also be a simple single line for a description or text. We have the opportunity to actually duplicate sections of the brief, which can be very handy if people need to upload multiple files, or if you have a section that might be 3 or 4 questions that you want repeated if the user selects that type of brief. We have radio buttons. Is this part of a campaign or is it a single project? We have the opportunity to put in checkboxes where the user could potentially select more than one option. And of course, we have the opportunity to upload electronic files into the system. Fundamentally, have the user fill this in, select and save next. The information gets saved into the database, and it drops us into the second of 2 potential pages that you can add to any one of your briefs. So the function point brief configuration area allows 2 unique pages to be presented. Often, the first page is more of a questionnaire, where the second page may be more of a brief or of a different type of data to the client. You have options to use both or one of them when you're configuring these, so really it can be configured to your requirements. Again, a required field, filling in the particular information that's associated, a drop-down menu showing this particular appropriate type of activities, and of course the last chance to describe items. So again, selecting Save and Next will drop us into the detail page for this particular brief. This should look familiar. It's the section that I had been showing to you earlier. Now, though, we're looking at this from a point of view of page 1 questions and what was filled in, as well as page 2 questions and what have been filled in. So seeing the 2 tabs here should really exemplify how the two items are available to you. I talked earlier when we came to this page about how the action icons in the top right would, if an estimate had not been created, say just that, add estimate. Of course, the print details and printing of either page 1 or page 2 become options for you. Perhaps page 2 is all that you wish to show to a client, or perhaps page 1 is all that you wish to show to a client. You can fill this information out accordingly. So a great little insight into the initial creation of a brief when it's done prior to an estimate or a workflow being planned for any piece of work. I said earlier that information gets carried over into the other module. If I select this add estimate, that will really demonstrate for you how all the information that we have from the brief that's relative will automatically drop in to the estimate add page. And there's that description I had been speaking of. Of course, from here, the user can go through creating phases and services and such, and building out the workflow appropriately. Good. So that's really a quick overview of showing the first scenario where an account executive would come in, find a particular company that they're working with, and use the company detail page as the starting ground for creating a request for an estimate to be built. That scenario that I'm typically speaking of in Function Point Portal can be something that you actually push out to your customer for them to complete for you, and hence will be part of a webinar that we'll do in the future. Scenario 2. Scenario 2 is associated with a slightly different workflow where you have a customer where you've already come in and you've opened the job for that customer. And the job is in place. You perhaps have prepared an estimate and you have financial information in play already, and you're now building out more detail around the creative brief. 30261 is the job I'd like to use. Of course, right from the main dashboard, selecting the job name will take me to the job detail page. If I were to select the job number, of course, it does take you directly to the tab for the financial information within this job. That's another webinar as well. But regardless, here you can see a previously opened job has a grayed out tab for brief. That immediately tells us that this particular piece of work does not have a brief associated with it. And again, our action icons in the top allow us and give us the opportunity to add a brief to this particular open job. So I select this. It takes us through the same page. It drops us into that brief area. I can just type in, say, web, and it will find the brief that's associated with websites. The information has come over regarding the descriptions and such. And of course, in this situation, the budgets perhaps are not being pulled in directly because the estimate's already been done. So we're not trying to give a clue or insight into the customer's propensity to spend dollars at this time. We're really focused on the creative side. I can select Save and Next, and that'll drop us into the first page of the brief for a website. A required field in orange. So again, I won't go in creating large descriptions. Again, what are the objectives with checkboxes, radio buttons, and in this case, showing what is a desired launch date for this particular piece of work. Save and Next. If a second page exists, it takes us to that second page. Again, notice this field is not in orange, showing that it is not a required field. Additional info is optional. Again, the other radio buttons, being able to duplicate for uploading of files, and saving and driving to the detail page for this item. Now, I've been talking about earlier how on our last example it said add an estimate. In this particular example, it has the link to the job, and it has a link back, has a link to the estimate, and it has a link back to the job. Again, selecting the job number is a slightly different link in that it takes you to the financial page of the job detail, the financial tab within the job detail page. So this is a great example of our two scenarios. One being the account executive filling in a brief to request an estimate, and the second one where the job's already been opened. If I drill back to the job detail page, we're now going to see that the brief tab is now in a slightly darker gray, telling us that there is indeed some information here. And we've included, in just a recent change, the ability to print the brief from this location, as well as using this to navigate back to that detail page. I just want to let you in on a little insight. In-house, as we speak, we're working on the ability to take briefs to the next level. And this is ad hoc in my telling you this. We are setting the system up, and we'll be releasing in early June the ability to have multiple different brief types associated with any specific job. Happy to say Sarah is well on her way with this, and we're really looking forward to this addition to our workflow. So stay tuned for that and watch for the ability to put multiple forms in against any particular job. Good. So that's really completing those two scenarios. What I'd like to do now is take you through the administrative section that when assigned as a privilege set for a user at your firm, you can actually work in coming into the back end of the admin section under brief types and create and manage your own set of briefs here in Function Point. In our sample, I've been showing you the standard brief and the website brief. And you can see that there are some other brief types that are here that would all, of course, be configured with questions and responses that are relative to the topic. I'm going to use the standard brief to just show to you this particular set of capabilities. And I'm going to drill through the 3 pages that are related to adding a new brief, creating the questions for page 1, and creating the questions for page 2. So if I select the brief name, it takes us into that, oh, excuse me, magic mouse, thank you. What the heck's going on? Okay, let me just come back to the main homepage and go through that again. Please forgive me. So if I come back in under admin, I'll just try and recover from that, and select brief types. I'm going to drill into the list view as I had been showing to you before, and then select to drive into a particular brief detail page. So in here, you can really look at this as being the page where you would name any new briefs. Notice the Add New Brief Type icon up in the top. That would fundamentally just present this section to you without any information. You could fill in the brief name that you wish, put in a description. You can, if you're working with multiple offices, relate this to a specific office. And you can also assign a particular account executive to receive information from any submissions that come off of FP Portal through this. You can make this visible to FP Portal or not. And fundamentally, you can also make it inactive so that it's not available in any drop-down menus. We've got some great instructions here for completing this information. You should find it pretty straightforward. I'm going to just drill into the next page, which is really where this starts to get a little bit more fun. This is the page that's used for creating each of the questions and for specifying the types of answers that you would expect from the user. So here you could see, if I were to, well, in our example, you could see the first question, what is the big picture? From the field type for the response, we have a drop-down that presents the different options, in this case, the text area. We have information that when using something such as a list view, for instance, you would fill in. And let me just navigate down. Notice here we have checkboxes, for instance, and hence we've put in on each line what the options would be under those checkboxes. So the field options presents that type of opportunity to us. And then we can also put in the required field request, as well as any particular comment that you'd like to add that is kind of like a prompt to the person looking at it, so that they give you the information that you're really looking for. It's pretty straightforward to add a new question. I select the little plus sign, and notice how it shows it to me. I put in here sample question. If I select checkboxes, and then it would be 1, 2, and 3. I might put in here, select the right checkbox for, I was thinking about making it a promotion for $10 off. And really just selecting to save those changes. Now, this particular set of options that we have here, this is the key to really the briefs in this configuration page. And the options are all really clearly listed here in our gray help area. The lists, i.e. checkboxes, radio buttons, and drop-downs, they all behave the same way. Select, fill in the information such as you just saw me. Files allow you to just have the ability to upload a file. Text boxes, there's a slight difference between text area and text. The text area is really designed for a large text block, whereas the text only is really simply associated with a simple line or response. You can do things such as email addresses. You can insist that it's a website URL, and you can validate to these items as well. So really quite useful. The duplication, there's the helper associated with user comments, so you can potentially break a brief into sections, and you can separate those sections through using the user comments. The duplication is a powerful option which allows you to really set up a section that you might need to duplicate. So imagine yourself with a need to have 3 questions repeated based on what the input person is doing. That whole set of 3 sections can be duplicated accordingly. And for those of you more advanced users, there are regex items that allow you to build algorithms to, say, validate a zip code or that type of information. And the select here takes us to Wikipedia for further information on that. Coming back to just once you have been working and you're building your form, you can also select to view that form, and hence it just gives you a little inside example of what you're creating is going to look like for your users when they're indeed filling this out. So notice here, what is the big picture, the sample question that I had just put in with the 1, 2, 3 options, and things just work and carry off accordingly. So our return to questions editor right here takes us back to page 1. Once you've filled this in and you're comfortable with what you're seeing, of course, you can drill through to page 2 of your brief and fill this in with the appropriate information as well. Good. Excellent. What I'd like to do now is just show to you, I'm going to cut back and just show to you our community help. The brief is really an excellent section in the system, and there's quite a bit of information that's available to you within our community help. Simply, of course, selecting community help drops you into the system, and under the training, help, and forums area, if you just to type in briefs and select search, then it's going to show to you just a few of the items that are really available here for you to work with. There's the using briefs. There's using FP for creative briefs or creating them, and also just some information in here around working with the client portal and creative briefs also. So I encourage you to come in here and check things out. A creative brief is your first step and potentially one of the most important steps in creating a successful communications campaign. You need flexibility to collect information that's pertinent to the type of ad or campaign that you're working on. And so hence we do, as you've seen, allow you to create multiple types of briefs. And as I said earlier, coming with our release in early July, you'll be able to add more than one brief to a specific job. It's going to be a nice little improvement to providing information against a job. What I'd like to do is encourage you to really design a set of briefs that are relative to your company. What's so important in any of these is that the way you word things and the way you look for responses matches the culture of your group and, of course, how you work with them. Get those briefs into Function Point, and really it's about allowing your team to get imaginative results as quickly as possible. And really that concludes what I wanted to go over with you today on briefs. Good. Kate, how are we doing with questions?
I think we're doing all right. I'm just answering the last one right now. There wasn't anything that specifically needs to go through. I don't think. If anyone wants Chris to address something specifically, if you want to send that through now, Chris, if you want to sort of go through the questions that are in the system, you can take a look. What I will do is I'll launch our next little poll. One of the things that we did commit to doing in the last webinar on creative briefs, and that Chris is actually working on as we speak, is a little bit of a I'll call it a crowdsourcing experiment that we're going to be doing. And what we're going to be asking is asking you who may be interested in participating in a bit of an exercise in sharing creative brief ideas and questions and things like that. What we'll be doing is we'll be sharing some best practice creative briefs and getting each of you who sign up and say you're interested to make comments on that, and from that we're going to kind of create a collaborative creative brief that we call sort of best in class for each of for potentially a few different types of briefs. So I'm going to launch that poll right now. And if you want to let us know if you're interested or not, and if you are, then Chris is going to be sending out an email.
Excellent. One of the questions that's come through, thanks very much, is with regards to the printing of briefs. Actually, as I was showing the brief, forgive me, I didn't take a close look, but I didn't see it drawing out the brief printout the way I would like to have. I just want to let you know that we are actually working on a new set of printouts for our customers to work with, and having a template that really matches your estimate in its format and in the flexibility to work with it is something that's in the work. And I'd like you to keep your eyes out for this for later this summer. I'm really looking forward to that coming out for everyone.
Yeah, there's quite a few questions and comments about the printouts, and believe us, we do know that it is a major issue, and it doesn't look as client pleasing as it probably should. So we have that as a major initiative that we're looking at this summer. The other thing I did just want to mention quickly is Chris, you had mentioned the updates to the briefs. Being able to add multiple briefs to a job as well as to a project. You did mention that as being early June, and it's actually early July that we'll be launching it. So,
did I say June? Oh,
yeah, it is early June now, so we're not launching it right now, but we will be within the next month, and the work has started on that.
July 3rd, July 6th?
July 3rd is, July 3rd.
Excellent. Good. Thanks, Tate. There's another comment here about the contact person not being a mandatory field when creating a new brief. And I'm just going to quickly go into the brief detail page to confirm that. The key contact here at the company. That is a required field through the estimate and jobs section, as far as I recollect. and hence we were really just trying to make sure that anyone looking at this knows who at the company the account executive is working for. But the request to not have it as mandatory, we will put aside, and if we hear that a number of times, we'll certainly do our best to address it accordingly.
I'll actually jump in there because it isn't required on the estimate, and I have actually made it so it's an auto-required field for some individual clients. So if you want to send an email to support@functionpoint.com, we actually do have a way to make that field not mandatory.
Oh.
The other thing too
is that I didn't realize that it wasn't required on the estimate.
It's the other thing that I will mention is that we have had requests, and as a general comment, we are looking at what types of capabilities we would have within the system in order to allow people to specify making certain things mandatory or not mandatory. There are certain things within the system that we need to have mandatory so that because of how it propagates throughout the system, but there are other things that more often than not, it's agencies that want to field mandatory that isn't currently mandatory. So we are looking at that. There are no plans for release of anything like that in the currently, but that is something that we get quite often.
If you print out a brief now before your updates, can you customize with company logo, etc.? I think the brief printouts right now are a little more limited, although the logo will show on the top, I believe. Forgive me, I was just incorrect with regards to the key contact item, but the company logo, I believe, does show on the brief printout. It's not in the same format, though, as some of the client-facing documents under estimates and invoices, for instance. Good. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I will stay online for a couple of more minutes to just ensure that if any questions do come in, that that I'm available to answer them. I'm really pleased with the number of people that have attended today. Tate, did you want to put up the poll with regards to participation in our creation of some multiple brief types? Just as a little.
The poll's up about the webinar.
Oh, excuse me.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't see the polls when they're up on the presenter screen. What I've been doing is actually quite a bit of looking online and through some of our resources for different creative briefs and different brief types, in preparation of us launching this ability to have multiple briefs on a single job. And hence, we're going to communicate with some of the clients that are interested and try and get some feedback on the items that we are working with on this. So, yeah, some fun stuff going on that way.
Okay, so I'm going to I'm gonna close off the webinar now. If you guys do have any questions, please feel free to send those on. Chris and I will be online for the next 10 minutes or so.